Hey everyone, we would like to welcome you to this first edition of just going through what Holy Week looks like. And I'm so privileged to be here at the Cathedral right here in the city of Orlando of St. Luke. And I'm joined today by one of my good friends, pastor of missions right here at the church, Peter Tepper. Peter, welcome.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
So glad that
it's a pleasure to be here.
Glad that you could be with us today. And we're going through Holy Week. You know, we're a few days away from entering into Palm Sunday and then starting the whole process of really reflecting and then later on celebrating Jesus, celebrating the fact that he died and resurrected. But I wanted to sit with you because I think so many times we skip so many of the most important moments in our salvation. And it's so easy to hit fast forward on all that and get straight into Easter Resurrection Day.
Yeah.
And celebrate that without really reflecting and spending some time really just thinking about everything that Jesus went through for us.
Yeah.
And so that's today's treat. Today we get a chance to really just take a full journey to understand what Holy Week really is. And for all of our pastor friends and network friends, and even those that are just watching to get informed and educated, this is for you. We want the church to be fully educated and fully involved and really just equipped to know that God is alive, but we get a chance to really participate in his whole journey and ministry all the way to the cross and towards resurrection. We're sitting right now in one of the iconic churches right here in the city of Orlando. Can you tell us a little bit more about St. Luke's?
Yeah, so this building is amazing when you walk in. It's the idea is to inspire you with the awe and grandeur of who God is. You can never outdo God in worship. So that's that's what we try to convey. But it's funny, this big building didn't start as a big building. It started as a small little prayer group, actually.
Oh, wow.
In one man's house. So a guy called Francis Epps, he was the grandson of Thomas Jefferson, came down here.
Like Thomas Jefferson, the president?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah,
oh, wow.
Thomas Jefferson, the president. So he came down here to grow oranges. Not Thomas Jefferson, but Francis Epps did. And he discovered, I really love Jesus, and I would love to plant a church, but I'm going to start with a small Bible study and small prayer. So he started doing prayer in the morning and prayer in the evening, doing evening and morning prayer, and that was in 1874. By 1878, it became a full-fledged church, and then it became a cathedral, which is really cool. And the current structure we're in was built in 1926.
Oh.
One of the fun little tidbits about that is that, not sure if you remember, but you weren't alive then, neither was I. But in 1928 and 29, there was a big stock market crash. Mm-hmm. So we started a building project, but we never fully finished it. So some of the exterior, that we're missing some places where there might be some more art or some more detailing with chisel work that was never finished, but it's still a cool testament that God uses whatever resources we have.
That's good. Yeah, I love that. And whoever walks by this building would never know, except for those that work in it and know all the history. And I think that's so cool that we could know more of the history of our city, for church leaders to know the history of our city, and just to know that fun fact that Thomas Jefferson's grandson was the church planner.
Yeah,
it started as a small group and it led to this. And so this is a beautiful, beautiful campus. If you ever get a chance to stop by, of course, call first, and you can get a full tour of this amazing, amazing cathedral for the glory of God. But let's get right into it, Peter. So talk to us. If there was stages or places that people can reflect on, what would that look like? What does that week look like? And what's the best way you could explain it?
Yeah, so that's a real good question. As I think about it, I think one of the first images that comes to mind is that obviously Jerusalem is the center of Jewish worship, and Jerusalem had a temple there. So one of the things that the cross tells us is that it's a bit like a temple. Mm-hmm. The cross, we can use a lot of fancy theological words that lose people, but I like pictures or images because they stay in your mind. They're metaphors. They really illustrate things. So a temple is a really cool way of thinking of it, is that in the temples were these nexus. They were these intersections, these connections between nature and supernature, between humanity and God. And there was always this idea from ancient, in almost every culture, that somehow we're disconnected from supernature, and how do we get reconnected? So temple, this idea of connection. And oddly enough, this next, coming up on Good Friday, which is just a couple days away. Good Friday is also on the calendar. It's Passover. And Passover is the oldest religious festival that is still celebrated to this day. It's the story of that in ancient Egypt, there was either a dead son in a house or there was a dead lamb, and everyone celebrated over Passover that they said a lamb died instead of us. So this idea of the
Rushing
temple,
of the blood over the door.
So this idea that something takes our place. So the temple analogy is the idea that something takes our place to restore that connection between us and God. And that's why John the Baptist, if you're at all familiar with the story, John the Baptist says, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." And Jesus is that pure, spotless, perfect Lamb who restores connection, takes away the sin of the world, and restores our connection to God the Father.
Love that. So that's a golden nugget right there, just that alone, just to even know that Good Friday wasn't just a random day that Jesus died on. It was a significant day for the Jewish people, and so more that we could really take in. So, Peter, what would it look like if we could break down in a matter of 15 minutes?
Okay.
What would it look like to really build the stages or the moments into what happened to Jesus for us that week?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. So let's rewind to say Saturday before Palm Sunday, and that Saturday it says it was 6 days before the Passover. John tells us that, and there's this story that Mary of Bethany comes in and anoints Jesus' feet as this fragrant offering. That's really cool. And then it says that because of that fragrant offering, Jesus was there with Lazarus, who was Mary's brother, but Lazarus had experienced resurrection in his own life, and so the Pharisees were like, "Whoa, wait a minute! We can't argue with that. We can't argue with God, with the kingdom breaking in the here and now. The kingdom is supposed to be in the future, not now, not that." And so it starts with that. This like the Pharisees and the leaders, the religious leaders of the day, saying, "We actually can't tolerate this. We need to plot to kill Jesus." So it starts there where we have this like kind of like clash being set up. So Jesus then sends his disciples to go get, says to his disciples to go and get a donkey. And two of these disciples know the prophecies from Zephaniah where it says, "Behold, your king comes to you, humble and riding on a donkey."
Yeah.
Kings in the old days, like Caesar, would come in on a chariot with stallions.
Victory.
Absolutely, is this idea of victory. Well, one of the other images that the Bible gives us for what happens on the cross on Good Friday is the idea of a battlefield. You said the word victory, it's a really good word actually used there. Paul in the book of Colossians says that Christ triumphed over the powers of darkness, making a public spectacle of them. Because the Caesars would capture their war trophies and they'd like tether them behind their chariot as they would ride in and make a spectacle of them. But what Jesus is saying is like, actually, I will be humiliated. I will be made a spectacle of on the cross. And so he turns all our ideas of power, all our ideas of what strength is on its head. And so in his weakness, he is most powerful. When Jesus Christ can't even take his hands off the cross because they're nailed there is when he's most powerful.
Oh.
And so if you think about that, like oftentimes people say, well, why would God force us? Don't we have free will? Well, here's what God the Holy Spirit does. He frees us. He doesn't drag us kicking and screaming to the foot of the cross. He takes the shackles off our feet so that we can run streaming to the foot of the cross and say, "Lord, have your way, have your will in my life." So that victory that he wins on the cross means that he's triumphed over death, hell, and the grave. And just like the old victors of old, whether it's David and Goliath, or if you think of the stories of even Achilles, in the story of Troy. If Achilles wins, the Greeks win.
That's right.
If David wins, all of Israel wins. And so Israel doesn't lift a finger, and David is the one that wins the victory for them. Jesus wins the victory for us. We don't lift a single finger on Good Friday, and we get all the victory that was his.
That's amazing.
We are more than conquerors.
I love that. I mean, you're going to make a Pentecostal run all over this cathedral, I'll tell you.
Glory.
That's awesome. So just think about that. Just that point alone, that Jesus' nails to the cross gives us the victory. Him being nailed, it wasn't the nails that, I've heard this so many times, it wasn't the nails that held him to the cross, it was his love for every single one of us. And that'll preach all on its own. What else can you tell us about Jesus' journey?
So I think another really cool thing about that journey is that, so on On Thursday night, Jesus is instituting what we call the Lord's Supper, the Kuriakon Deipnon. It says he took bread and he gave thanks, which thanks in Greek is the word Eucharist, which is, some traditions still use that word, like our Eastern Orthodox friends use that word, the Roman Catholics still use that word. We sometimes use the word communion, which is this idea of fellowship. He's hanging out with his most intimate friends and having fellowship with them. So he's doing that. He institutes the Lord's Supper, and he says, he takes the bread and he says, "This is my body, which is broken for you." And in the Passover, they would lift up the matzah, and the celebrant of that, the who's leading the service, would say, "This is the bread of our affliction when we were slaves in Egypt." And it's the idea that Jesus is saying, "I'm taking all that affliction upon myself." So what we see is almost like this idea of a marketplace. That's another really good analogy that you can use for what happens on the cross. It's also used in church history throughout the ages, the idea of marketplace. That just like the people of Israel were slaves in Egypt and now they're free, just like 150 years ago, there were so many of our brothers and sisters here in the U.S. that weren't free, but Jesus redeems them. He pays the price to buy them, and now they are free. So there's this marketplace. This is the bread of our affliction, and Jesus says, "This is my body, which is broken for you."
Yeah, you think about that. Even the blessing in Deuteronomy, where it says, "You're blessed in the city, you're blessed in the marketplace." That has so much more meaning when you think about that. You know, it's more than just God's prosperity or blessing of progression for us, but the fact
redemption.
That it's in the marketplace where we are set free.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good, really good.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what else can you tell us?
So I think there's a fourth little image that we get, actually, believe it or not, and it's funny. My aunt is a retired judge here in Florida, over near Sarasota, near Dade City, but she's a judge. And I remember as a little kid, I'd walk into her courtroom and it'd say, all rise, and you'd wait and do all that fun stuff, and then you'd wait. You'd wait because she was going to deliver a verdict. She was going to pronounce some words that the defendant was waiting to hear. Or not wanting to hear. But the judge would say two things. And here in the U.S., in every court that you go to, you'll hear two words. Two sets of words are said. You either hear guilty or not guilty. And so I think the courtroom analogy is a really useful thing for what happens on the cross. Believe it or not, there's this moment on one of Jesus' 7 last words on the cross where he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing." You see, in every courtroom, the only thing that human judge can ever say over you is not guilty, because it's beyond reasonable doubt.
Right.
That's all we can get to. We can only get to reasonable doubt. I think you're not guilty, but I'm not sure. But
guilty is a proven
innocent. Well, no, you're innocent until proven guilty.
That's it. Yeah.
But even then, like, they say we're innocent, but it's funny because the judge never ever utters the word innocent over you, and yet God the Father, through His Son Jesus' death on the cross, utters the verdict that you and I have always been wanting to hear: innocent. I mean, that's Jesus starts. That's his ministry ends with our innocence. It actually begins with the Father even saying that over His Son. "This is my Son, in whom I'm well pleased." And because of His death on the cross, the Father can say that over every one of us that have said yes to Jesus. "This is my daughter, in whom I'm well pleased. This is my Son, in whom I'm well pleased." Because when I look at you, I see the record of my Son. I don't see your criminal record. I see His spotless, blameless record.
I love that, Peter, because I'm one that I've always been works driven, right? And
aren't we all?
and I am a workaholic by nature. And it wasn't until a few years ago where God just really put that on me. He was like, I was pleased with my Son before He ever did anything.
Yeah.
Before He started His ministry, I was already pleased with Him. And so I'm pleased with you without you ever doing anything more for me. And that speaks volumes for us today. The fact that we are innocent. We are innocent in the eyes of God because of the redemption of Jesus Christ in our life. So what else can you tell us?
Well, so yeah, there's that. And then I think that the last one is that it's a show. Okay, so like think of a theater, but I don't mean like theater in terms of like cosplay or faking things, but I say as a show. St. Paul says this. He says, "But God demonstrates His love for us in this, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us." So yeah, the marketplace is a good analogy. The victory on a battlefield is a great analogy. The courtroom is a great analogy. The temple sacrifice, but all of those are encompassed by one that's even greater, which is love. It's this the cross is the supreme demonstration of God's justice and of his love, which like, it's funny, we almost think, do we have to bargain between justice and love? But actually, it's that beautiful prayer that we sometimes say over in England. It's called, it's a gospel assurance, or it's an assurance of pardon. We call it sometimes absolution, but it's this idea that the minister will say over the people, he'll say, may the God who is both power and love grant you forgiveness. And you rarely find someone who's powerful and loving, or very rarely do you find someone who's loving and powerful. But in Jesus Christ, those are stunningly mixed on the cross.
Yeah.
Power and love, that's what the cross is.
I love that. So good. So good. As we get into Palm Sunday, this Sunday, and then we go into Good Friday, what's so good about Good Friday?
It's so good. Well,
and what would happen at St. Luke's on a Good Friday?
On a Good Friday, well, actually, it's funny you should say that, because you think about it, Good Friday, we're celebrating someone's death. Have you thought about that? Like, that's a bit morbid, right? But actually, it was so stunning that the early church called it good news. That's what gospel means, good news. How can the death of one man be good news for the world? But on Good Friday, if you walk into this church, and different traditions do things differently. It's a fun little tradition if you've never experienced it. We'll start with this building fully lit, and we'll sing a few songs, have some scripture reads. We'll basically read through all of Isaiah 53. And as all these different, as each scripture is read, slowly but surely the lights start going off, because the light of the world is dying. And so as you get to the very last one, there will be just one candle. So we'll start with a load of candles, and as each scripture is read, a candle snuffed out, the lights are dimmed in the church. Another candle snuffed out, the lights are dimmed. And when you get to the last one, when Christ says, "It is finished," the candle goes out, and the whole church sits in darkness and in silence, as we remember that the light of the world was snuffed out so that we could have light and life.
I love that. So if you don't have a fellowship or a church that you could visit this Good Friday, I recommend you stopping by St. Luke's and celebrating with them and remembering Jesus. This is one of the most important parts of the Christian life, where we can come and remember Jesus, but also celebrate him. But the reason we wanted to do this, Peter, was we don't want to skip all these important moments and get straight into the celebration of the resurrection of the cross. It's kind of like skipping all the good parts in a movie and getting to the end to see the action hero walking away from this
You missed all the character development.
That's it. And so I think we get an opportunity to help churches once again, and communities and church families and congregations, to really put a focus back on the journey, put a focus back on the Eucharist, of just celebrating in communion together, celebrating the marketplace, that redemption place where we were, Jesus took our place so that we can have freedom. And then ultimately getting to Easter Sunday, where we all know Jesus resurrects from the grave and has the victory for every single one of us. So, Peter, I want to thank you for making this possible, for being a part of this amazing discussion that I just want to keep on talking while we drink this deeply coffee.
Oh yeah, it's a good coffee.
Really good coffee.
Thank you.
And for those that don't know, Peter grew up in España.
Yes, crecí en España, eso sí es verdad.
So, Peter o Pedro habla un español perfecto, ¿verdad que sí?
Sí, es un castellano, bueno, no mal hablado, pero es un castellano de ahí de Madrid. Sí.
I appreciate you, my friend.
My
thank
pleasure.
you for the time.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. If this has blessed you, please just like below or share with some friends. And let's just get the word out on the good news of Jesus all around this Holy Week. And I believe that together we can help people know who Jesus is. Love y'all. Keep moving forward.